Once again from Tetra Tech, we have Jacine Witzel, previously introduced. I will add that she is a very good ceramic artist too, so ask her about that. Oh yeah, I'm not supposed to wander around, sorry. Also Sarah Dean, a project manager for the Asset Management Program, and please welcome them.
See if it comes up. Oh, all right, now I'm live. So remember, my word of today was brevity. So we have the one slide. We're going to go through the whole process of how to make sauerkraut. It's going to be fabulous. Okay, maybe not. So I'm Jacine Witzel with Tetra Tech. Sarah Dean is also with Tetra Tech. We're part of the asset management system or group, not system. We builder. We're all systems now. So we're part of the asset management group, and we also actually were the ones that were deployed on this project that we're about to show you. We're going to go over something different that Builder can do. So today we have a small agenda. So it's not actually just one slide. It's not even two, it's several. And we've got cool pictures of buildings that have been destroyed. So anticipation. So we're going to discuss the problem, which is what we were walking into, and the scope, what we were doing there, and why and how to use ESMS/Builder in this case, and then lessons learned. That's the fun part. Well, okay. The cool pictures are the fun part, but lessons learned, that's cool too. So let me set the scene. We have an island. It's an installation in a remote location. Think Gilligan's Island. This was pretty far. This is pretty small. This lovely little Gilligan's Island was hit by rogue waves. Not necessarily like a full-blown storm, not a tsunami. Weird rogue waves. So the buildings were, a lot of them on the shore side, on the storm side, were damaged. Some were completely washed away. And the installation had started looking at it, but they were like, oh, we need people. And so they called us because we can do everything. I didn't even have to tell you all that this morning. You just know. So they had the building issues, but they also had an airfield, and it was flooded. And all of their utility systems were flooded as well. All their stormwater and the sanitary sewer and the potable water, fuels, electrical, all of that was affected. I skipped ahead a little soon. So let me keep rambling about the problem. So part of the problem with getting hit by a disaster is it sort of affects not only the buildings and the storm sewer and all of that, but it also affects the people. So everyone had to, or almost everyone, had to leave the island. And with the airfield out of commission, the only way to leave the island was by boat. The only way to get back to the island was by boat. So that was hard. So people were displaced. Services were disrupted because everything got flooded. And the mission critical functions were impacted because not only did some of the mission critical buildings actually have damage, but then you had staffing issues because they were evacuated and had to leave too. So when we came on the scene, they had done their initial assessments of the buildings, so they had their own list, and they're like, we think these are awful. Can you go verify? And we're like, yes, we can. And they had started cleaning up. They were trying to get some of the buildings back online. So most of the buildings had been partially brought back online. Some of them we couldn't access. So the non-mission critical ones were sort of outliers. So for the scope, we were asked to answer 3 questions. We were asked how much damage was caused by the waves. Like, what did the waves really do? We know we're on an island. We know we have a little extra deterioration from some salt, because that's what happens on islands. But what did the wave do? Second question, how much is it going to cost to fix it? Because it's always a follow-up question. How much is this going to cost me? And then how soon can we get back up and running? So that was our task, is to answer those questions. They gave us a list of 75 facilities and said, go find these. Tell us what they're like. And some of them were in Builder, some of them weren't. They had assessed, in 2022, they had assessed buildings, most buildings, that were 1,000 square feet or more. But all the little buildings, which there are a lot on a little island, were not in Builder. So we sort of knew what we were doing, and then we sort of didn't. So there were some wild cards. Like I said, they had an airfield, so we did pavement assessments, and then all the utility systems. We looked at those, which included a power plant and a water treatment plant. And now I'm handing it over to Sarah, who's going to tell us about why we should use Builder in this weird type of situation.
Thank you, Jacine. How y'all doing? I'm going to talk about why Builder. Why Builder? Why did we rely on Builder data when we went into this disaster assessment? Well, because the data was available, right? We did not want to go in blind. I mean, we kind of went in with one eye closed, but at least we had one eye open, right? We were allowed to, with Builder, with the Builder data, the legacy data that was available to us, we could set a baseline of the facilities and the real property. We knew, hopefully, what should be there. Because what the client really wanted to know is, what is the difference between the general deterioration of these old facilities versus the storm damage? And Builder enabled us to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, that's storm, that's just underfunded, right? We utilized Builder, the legacy data, during the pre-site preparations. Our teams were able to review past inspection data, look at the legacy data and kind of understand the size, the number, and the complexity of the buildings that were enrolled in Builder that we were walking into, right? So we went with some expectations. As Jacine said, in addition to in addition to facilities, we were also remix. Fired. Okay, I didn't think I was doing that bad.
Damn AI.
We did not have the same level of legacy data for the utility and the pavement, which would have been just invaluable to have that information. So with ESMS, right, the client could have had all of that data rolled up already, and we could have gone in. So that's the goal that we're working towards, right? Bringing all of the disparate parts together so that everybody can talk, and ESMS could be a one-stop shop for clients. And then as ESMS becomes more robust, right, you're going to be able to check all systems, all assets against the records, assuming your reassessments are up to date. And if you guys have any questions about reassessments, feel free to stop by our booth after this talk. Happy to discuss it. Jacine gave me the fun slides. We get to look at all the fun photos. So again, walking in, older facility, older installation, the buildings were not always in the best of shape to begin with. Here we have a storage facility that already had an existing level of corrosion. And so the force of the wave with the existing level of corrosion on the structural steel members was the downfall of that main corner column. So you can see before and after, we've got some corrosion in the before photo after the whole wall has been taken out, right? So that was the impact of that wave. Looking at another warehouse, a smaller facility that wasn't quite as bad of a shape. You know, that last building to start off with pre-storm was probably amber minus. This one was a little bit better shape, but if you can notice, there's a tree in the building now, right? So a wave washed a section of tree into the building. It damaged the structure clearly. It broke the metal siding and the stud connections along the side and the rear of the building. So there was not an insignificant amount of damage to this one facility simply from the wave. So this is a clear indication of kind of the damage assessment, or the damage that the wave impact had. Contrast that with this facility. CMU construction, minimal structural damage, right? What's different? The trees are gone, right? We have, on the left side, we have trees and grass. On the right, we just have rock and coral. So that was our evidence that that building had been inundated by water. There wasn't the same structural damage that you saw in the previous two buildings, but we have a clear indicator here. Water had entered the building. It had flooded everywhere. All of the soft finishes, all of the furniture, it was gone. And it was in the process of being removed while we were doing our inspection. So this one was an interesting one for sure. In addition, the shoreside the shoreside windows, they were all cracked, all damaged, all broken, big wave impact, and in some cases, in this building and some other ones, the condensing units had been completely washed away. All right, so just a big wave just took everything out. Structure's fine, but the building is still damaged. So those were buildings that were already in builder. Those are those large, over 1,000 square feet facilities that we had the legacy data on. But of course, as everybody knows on these installations, there are tons of teeny tiny structures that have to be accounted for. Here we have the chapel that got hit by the wave. That exterior enclosure, that's 75 feet away from the foundation. So that got completely washed away. And we were trying to piece together no legacy data. How are we going to determine what are the different elements of the building? And we were able to look at the floor slab, what was remaining, look at the size of the building, determine that it did have an interior wall and that it had a door, right? Those are kind of the basic stuff that we needed to know to build replacement costs. But this was not atypical on this installation, this level of damage. Here we have two more structures that were not in builder. On the left, you have a garbage enclosure at the DFAC, which is very important, maybe not super mission critical, but you gotta be able to do something with all your trash, right? And we have a wreck shelter. Nothing. There was nothing left of these structures except for the foundation. So we had to, do some forensic work, make some assumptions as to building materials so that we could present our client with a full picture of replacement costs and damages and things like that. In addition to facilities, right, we also did utility assessments. We looked at stormwater, drinking water, sanitary sewer, electrical, fuels. This slide is just of electrical. The vault on the left was completely compromised by the wave. All of the equipment was completely compromised. We have a transformer that was damaged. We have a switchgear that was damaged. This building, this is mission critical equipment that was taken offline by the storm event, right? So this was what the base was really keyed in on. It's like, how can we get this going? How bad is it? We need these mission critical equipment. And they needed to, upgrade their facility. And that's what's probably gonna happen, hopefully, is what's gonna happen. Our utility and pavement deliverables were done in GIS, those linear assets. You love the mapping aspect, right? It's so key for linear assets to have that map. With ESMS, right? You have that mapping element, and we could have pushed all of our data up, right? Once EMS is online, we'd be able to marry all of these parts together, push all of our assessment data from the pavement to the roof on up. And then looking at pavements, we looked at the airfield, as Jason mentioned, mission critical asset, remote location. What do you mean you can't fly? You can't land here? We have to take a 5-hour boat. How are we gonna get supplies? Things like that. So we did, on the main runway, we did 40-ish samples at about 2,500 square feet. And on the taxiway and aprons, we were looking at 4 to 5 samples each of another 2,500 square feet. And what we found, no pavement section on the airfield met the minimum standards that the Department of the Army has set. So an already deteriorated runway was further damaged and covered in debris, rocks, coral, trees, anything and everything that you can think of ended up on that airfield and took it offline. So these are mission critical assets that were severely damaged by the weather event. My last slide before I pass it back to Jacine, it wouldn't be a builder conference without a chiclet chart, right? Everybody loves a chiclet chart. We love the pretty colors, red, yellow, and green. But what we wanted to do in this was just highlight the number of buildings that simply were not in builder, that we walked in blind on and had to collect data on, that may or may not have been standing, may not have existed, may have existed in 10%, 80%, whatever they were in their original form, right? They just didn't exist that way anymore. So we can see, you don't have to worry about the teeny tiny text, but there was changes in BCI across, or we enrolled other buildings into builder, for the client, just so that we could do this comparison. And with that, I will pass it back to Jacine to talk about lessons learned.
Okay, here's where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, what worked? What worked with using Builder as a post-assessment disaster tool? It was excellent at giving us a before photo of the buildings that were in Builder. That was so great because then we could see what damage the storm actually caused and then what damage was just from the life on the island. Because as you saw with the building that had the washed out structure, there was a lot of corrosion, there's a lot of damage that's just inherent in that environment. So it gave us a great benchmark. It also gave us a great benchmark on the condition 2 years ago. How is this building holding up? Well, how is this building holding up now after the wave? Is it even there? So that was great. It also was super helpful when we were CONUS to plan for when we were going to be OCONUS. So we pulled the Builder data from that installation. We had it. We knew sort of what buildings we were going to walk into, how complex were they, how much equipment was sitting there, how much square footage we were going to try to do, and then that helped plug in some of those holes. Didn't plug in every hole, but it plugged in some. So I'm all for getting all the buildings on an installation in Builder. This is a great reason, especially if you're around storm, tornadoes, hurricanes, all of those areas, get them all in there, because then it gives you like this great benchmark. You can go back and go, here, this is what our building looked like before, and now here's what it looks like. So it gives you great defendable data. It also allowed us to have a common talking tool. The installation had used Builder, obviously, because they had data. So they understood how we were going to go into a building, what we were going to be looking at, what the ratings look like from Builder, what the reports look like from Builder. So it gave us a good common language to talk to the client about the conditions of their building. So that part was great. So there are some drawbacks to using Builder. As you guys may know, it is not the quickest way to do an assessment. And when you're in a post-disaster environment, you are not there to linger. They would like for you to leave, do your job, go away. So what we did is we collected information about the components that either were still there, were new since the last inspection, or had wave damage to it. So if the siding was there and it was corroded, but it looked just like the rating 2 years ago, okay, well, that's not wave damage. We can let that rating go, let the lovely Builder life cycle curve keep doing its thing, we're good. But if it was impact, or as in the one, the tree blows into it and breaks all the connections and the exterior siding is falling off, okay, we're gonna note that. So we did that for all the buildings. And so it wasn't a full assessment. We told them, you're not getting your credit for doing a Builder assessment for this week. We can't do that. So we weren't able to do that for them. Even though the client knows Builder and knows the rating scales and the methodology of Builder, yeah, they didn't want to use necessarily the Builder rating scales and colors on their final reports. So then we're like, well, which way do you want us to show in the final report? Do you want to see a Builder report, or do you want us to customize it for you? So that's something like, talk to the client at the beginning before you figure out what your final report's going to look like, because you may need to adjust how your outputs are. In this case, we did a weird hybrid. It works for this client. And then, as Sarah alluded to, I love ESMS. The potential of this is awesome, because I want all the data, and I want it all in one database. So yeah, as Sarah said, if we had the linear assets in there, the utilities, the fuels, the pavement sections, we could have had all that to benchmark against. They could have had exactly what was wave damage related and what we have. But we didn't have that, so they just got all the after. So it made it a little harder to tell them exactly what was caused by the storm, because it looks a lot like deterioration, especially on pavement. You're like, I don't think the storm caused alligatoring that's super thick, but we'll go with that. So I have another lessons learned slide because there were lots of lessons learned. So that was more builder, ESMS focused. This one is more just like logistics because you're going into a post-weather event disaster site. So the American Institute of Architects is like super big. We're all about disaster training right now. So I've done a lot of the disaster assessment training to do the rapid assessments. So when this project came up, I was like, yes, I've been waiting for this. I'm trained. So I knew that as you go into one of these sites, like it's gonna be crazy town. Your client is doing a million different things at one time. They are not available to you. They'll talk to you as much as they have to, but they're not there to babysit you. You are not getting an escort. You may not even get like a way to get around. You're gonna have to be self-sufficient, flexible, pivot on a dime on what you wanna do. Keep in mind, utilities may be offline. You could walk into a building, it could be structurally unsound. You're walking into the part that looks structurally sound. Walk all the way around the building before you start going in places and make sure that there are no live wires and maybe bring some N95 masks in case there's organic growth compound around. So just know this is not your normal FCA environment. Bring some extra flashlights, headlamps, do whatever. But it's interesting, it's challenging. You may not know where exactly you're gonna sleep. They'll try to work that out for you. You may not know what you're gonna eat. They'll try to work that out for you. But just know that it's gonna be different. So just work with them, try to be patient, and don't bother them if you can help it. So data-wise, before you even go out, see if they will give you anything and everything. Can you get satellite imagery before, after, at all? Can you get any real property records from them? You'll have your builder data if they are in builder, but get anything you can beforehand. They're gonna be busy. They're gonna not want to give you anything. So in that case, when you get on site, then you go and you're like, do you have any records rooms? Do you have DPW? Do you have any real property information? Can I take a photo? Can I do this? Look on their walls for historic photos of the installation. Get anything that could give you a before photo, because it may not be in builder. So you may be trying to figure out what was here. So just when you're there, try to play like a little detective. See if you can figure out what your buildings are. Let's see, I think that's got it. Yeah, I think I wrapped it up. Oh, okay, so we'll go back to the kraut recipe. So you just need cabbage. It could be red cabbage, it could be a green cabbage, it doesn't matter. You can chop it different ways, different people, different styles. You need salt, a crock, a glass or something to weight it down so the air doesn't quite get to it. So yeah, I really can teach you how to make sauerkraut out there, but I figure you probably have questions about what we did and not necessarily about kraut, but I could answer both. Go ahead.
Not a huge kraut fan, so I'll stay away from that. Melissa Belton, Booz Allen Hamilton. So when you guys were redoing the design plans for new projects to replace what was missing, did you guys take the opportunity to consolidate buildings that maybe had functionality, or did you guys see any ways to improve on usage rates? Did you guys include any of that, or were you just replacing one for one with what existed previously?
They were asking us to just give them one-for-one replacement, so we didn't go into that, and they needed the report ASAP, of course. So they were like, well, give us recommendations. Give us some near-term, long-term recommendations with pricing, of course. But they talked about, initially they talked about well, maybe you could look and keep that in mind. And then it became slightly hair on fire, pivot. And so then they were like, no, just get it done, get us the report, get us the cost. And so we talked about it, but then in the end they were just like, nope, we want it to streamline, go. So opportunity missed.
I got a question. Can you talk more about the challenges of what it must have been like to trying to document conditions while the conditions are changing because they're cleaning up actively while you're there?
That was a little challenging. The dining facility they were trying to bring that online, and like I think within days of us leaving, they would have it back online. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I would necessarily bring it fully back online. So yeah, we had to make, again, this is where like you're in a weird environment, so you're making some assumptions. You're like, okay, well, you fixed the windows, so because the glass was blown out of the DFAC windows and everything. And so I'm like, you're fixing it. You haven't fixed all of it. I'm going to anticipate. We did a little anticipation. I know you're not supposed to do that in a facility condition assessment moment in time, but we're like, okay, well, you're actively working on it. So we're going to assume that all this carpet you're ripping out, you're going to put something back. We don't know what it is, so we can't really put that in, but we're not going to rate your carpet red minus. We can take it out. Or we can assume you're going to replace it with carpet and put it in, and then that gives them some of the costs back. But yeah, no, it was a little odd. Luckily, most of the buildings, they were focused on only a few at a time, so it only happened on a few. But it was a little weird. Like we were doing some assumptions. It was not completely cut and dry. They probably need a new assessment, full assessment.
Did you ever find out if their cleanup created a worse condition? Like when they pulled the tree out of the roof, that something else got damaged?
The ones that were sketchy, like the corner of the building, they were just leaving those alone. That became more of their midterm fixes. They're like, and we gave them recommendations like, maybe you should just demo this and then take the inventory out of it once it's down. They were just leaving those alone, and they had not even had the opportunity to like caution tape them off. So some of our near-term recommendations were like, you should section this off and not let people around it until you have like either done something to it, shored it up, get a in detail structural assessment. We did have a structural engineer come with us, and so he was doing some spot assessments on things, but even he was like, this one may need to be looked at. They had some interesting equipment and buildings there, so there were some building types that he's like, you may need another engineer to come look at this and double check. So it was interesting. It was fun. It was weird and fun. I would do it again all day long.
Any other questions?
We can go back and show the pretty pictures again.
All right, thank you, Tetra Tech, for that disaster of a presentation. See what I did? See what I did there?
It's sad, but true.
She gave me permission to use that joke. All right, who wants a long lunch? All right, thank you, Julie. Let's have a long lunch. We'll come back at 1 o'clock.